Nandi was a breath of fresh air in a village shrouded by shadows and silence. Her laughter was a melody that pierced through the dull monotony of daily life, bringing a spark of light to every corner of the village. From the moment she awoke, Nandi's spirit radiated warmth and hope, unlike anyone else around her. Where the villagers trudged through their days weighed down by hardship and sorrow, Nandi skipped lightly, her eyes twinkling with a joy so genuine that it could not be ignored. Born into a small family, Nandi's life had not been without struggle. The village where she lived was a place where smiles were rare and happiness even rarer. The hardships of drought, famine, and loss had worn the people thin, their faces etched with worry and their hearts heavy with grief. Yet through all this gloom Nandi found reasons to laugh. Whether it was the antics of the children playing in the dust, the fluttering of colorful birds against the gray skies, or the simple joy of a shared story, her laughter burst forth like sunshine after a storm. From early morning, Nandi's laughter echoed through the narrow alleys and cracked mud walls. It was a sound so clear and vibrant that even the elders paused in their work to listen. Her giggles and chuckles floated on the air, weaving their way through the marketplace, the fields, and the small homes clustered together like tired souls seeking comfort. It was a laughter that was not forced or timid but free and unburdened. It was the kind of laughter that made others remember what it felt like to be carefree and alive. Despite the beauty of her laughter, not everyone in the village welcomed it. Some saw Nandi's joy as something unnatural, even threatening. To them, her constant laughter was an act of defiance against the hardships they all endured. They whispered behind her back, calling her reckless and disrespectful. "How can she laugh when so many suffer?" they would say bitterly. "Is she blind to the pain around her?" In a village where sorrow had become a shared language, Nandi's happiness was mistaken for arrogance or ignorance. This misunderstanding made Nandi's world more complicated than it appeared. While she wanted nothing more than to spread cheer and warmth, the murmurs of disapproval sometimes clouded her sunny demeanor. She was young and sensitive, and the harsh judgments stung her more than she let on. Yet, deep inside, she refused to let the darkness snuff out her light. For Nandi, laughter was more than just a sound, it was a way of fighting back, a silent rebellion against despair. Nandi's laughter was also a bridge to those who had forgotten how to smile. There were a few in the village, especially the children and a handful of elders, who found solace in her happiness. They would gather around her, drawn by the infectious joy she radiated. Her laughter was a balm to their weary hearts, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there could be moments of light. The children would mimic her giggles, the elders would smile softly, and for a brief time the village felt a little less heavy. Among those who treasured Nandi's laughter was her grandmother, a wise woman who had seen many seasons come and go. She understood that Nandi's joy was not just frivolous happiness but a deep wellspring of strength. "Your laughter is a gift, child," she told Nandi one evening as the sun dipped behind the hills. "It is the flame that keeps hope alive in our hearts. Never let anyone make you feel ashamed of that." Despite the encouragement from her grandmother, Nandi still faced the cold glares and sharp words from others. Some villagers openly scolded her, warning her to be more serious and respectful. "This is not a time for laughter," they would say. "Life is hard and we must all carry our burdens silently." These words weighed heavily on Nandi, but they never fully silenced her. Her laughter would return with the sunrise, stronger and more determined than before. Nandi's joy was also a mystery to many outsiders who passed through the village. Travelers who stopped to rest would notice the young girl with the radiant smile and ask about her. They would wonder how someone so young could carry such light in a place so full of shadows. Nandi's laughter became a story whispered beyond the village borders, a tale of resilience and hope in the face of adversity. Within her heart, Nandi believed that laughter had power. It was a language that transcended pain and sorrow, a way to connect with the world beyond the hardships of daily life. Whenever she laughed, she felt as if she was weaving invisible threads of happiness that might one day wrap around the village and protect it from despair. It was a secret she held close, a quiet strength that gave her courage to face whatever came her way. But Nandi also knew that her laughter was fragile. It was a delicate flower in a harsh landscape, easily crushed by harsh words or cold stares. That was why she cherished the moments when her laughter was met with smiles or shared by others. Each smile was a small victory, each burst of laughter a spark that could ignite a fire of hope. As the days passed, Nandi continued to laugh. She laughed while helping her mother in the fields, while playing with friends near the river, and even while carrying water from the well. Her laughter was a constant companion, a light that refused to dim even when the skies grew heavy with storm clouds. And so, the village lived with this paradox, a place weighed down by sorrow, yet illuminated by the laughter of a single girl. Nandi's laughter was a song that no one could silence, a joyful rebellion against the darkness that threatened to consume them all. Though some saw her laughter as defiance or disrespect, those who truly listened could hear the promise of better days hidden within her bright, ringing voice. The village was a place where the weight of hardship pressed down on every heart and every home. For as long as anyone could remember, life had been a continuous struggle, a cycle of droughts, failed harvests, and loss that seemed never-ending. The people moved quietly through their days, their faces marked by lines of worry and sorrow, their eyes dull from the weight of countless disappointments. The once vibrant colors of the village had faded into muted earth tones, reflecting the collective gloom that had settled over the land like a thick fog. Generations had lived under the shadow of hardship, each passing down their grief to the next as if it were an heirloom. Stories of loss and survival were etched deeply into the village's memory, shaping the way its people saw the world and themselves. From a young age, children learned to carry the burdens of their families, to speak softly and to hide their pain behind stoic expressions. Laughter, once a natural part of childhood, had become a rare and unwelcome sound, something that disrupted the solemn rhythm of daily life. The village elders often spoke in hushed tones about the times before, when the land was fertile and the people's spirits were unbroken. But those days felt like distant legends, stories told around flickering fires that offered little comfort to those awake in the present. Instead, the villagers clung to the reality of their struggles, accepting the harshness of life as an unchangeable truth. Hope was a fragile thing, buried beneath layers of grief and pragmatism. In this heavy atmosphere, expressions of joy were met with suspicion or outright disapproval. Laughter, especially loud or frequent laughter, was seen as inappropriate, sometimes even rebellious. It was as if the villagers believed that showing happiness in the midst of suffering was a betrayal of their collective pain, a denial of the hardships they had endured. To laugh too loudly was to invite judgment, to risk being labeled careless or disrespectful. Parents taught their children to be cautious with their emotions, warning them that frivolity could bring misfortune or offend the spirits that governed the land. "Keep your joy inside," they would say, "or the world will take it away." This caution was passed down like a solemn code, shaping the very way the village breathed and moved. The sound of laughter was replaced by quiet sighs and the steady rhythm of work, as everyone tried to carry their share of the burden without complaint. Even the marketplace, once a place of lively exchange and chatter, had lost its cheer. Vendors spoke in low voices, their faces tight with worry about the dwindling crops and scarce resources. Children played in smaller groups, their games subdued and their smiles fleeting. The village's heart seemed to slow, weighed down by the constant reminder of what had been lost and what might never be regained. The elders, burdened by years of grief, often gathered in the shade of the ancient baobab tree, sharing memories of better times but also cautioning against hope that might lead to disappointment. Their stories were tinged with sorrow and resignation, and their words carried the weight of survival rather than celebration. In their eyes, laughter was a luxury the village could no longer afford, a dangerous distraction from the realities of life. Some villagers believed that joy was a privilege reserved for the distant past, before the storms, before the famines, before the sickness that had claimed so many. They feared that to embrace happiness openly was to tempt fate, to invite the return of misfortune with open arms. This belief created an invisible barrier around the village's collective spirit, a wall of silence that muffled the natural human need for joy and connection. Within this atmosphere, those who dared to laugh faced quiet rebuke or harsh criticism. Laughter was mistaken for defiance, a refusal to acknowledge the pain that bound them all together. Some saw it as a sign of disrespect, as if the person laughing was mocking the suffering of others or denying the seriousness of their shared struggles. This made it difficult for anyone to express happiness freely, turning joy into a forbidden fruit. The village's mood was further darkened by the long nights that stretched endlessly, filled with restless dreams and whispered fears. The stars, once bright and plentiful, seemed to dim behind a veil of clouds, mirroring the fading hopes of the people below. In these nights, silence was both a comfort and a curse, a reminder of everything that was lost and everything that might never be found again. This gloom seeped into every corner of the village, into the cracked walls of homes, the parched fields, and the weary faces of its inhabitants. It was a heaviness that clung to the air, a palpable presence that could be felt in the slow footsteps of the children and the quiet tears of the mothers. It shaped the way people moved, spoke, and even dreamed, creating a world where lightness of being was seen as a threat to survival. Despite this, life in the village continued. Days were marked by the steady routines of farming, gathering water, and tending to family needs. The villagers worked tirelessly, their efforts fueled by necessity rather than hope. Every small success, a sprouting seed, a shared meal, a child's health, was met with quiet gratitude but rarely with celebration. The culture of endurance was ingrained deeply, and emotions were kept carefully in check to avoid the risk of disappointment. Yet even in this pervasive gloom, there were small sparks of resistance. In the hidden corners of the village, behind closed doors or in the laughter of children at play, there were moments when joy slipped through the cracks. These moments were fragile and fleeting, quickly swallowed by the heavy atmosphere but never fully extinguished. They were reminders that beneath the surface of sorrow, the human spirit still yearned for light and happiness. The tension between grief and joy created an unspoken battle within the village. On one side stood the weight of generations of hardship, demanding silence and solemnity. On the other stood the quiet, persistent hope that life might still hold moments worth celebrating. This struggle played out in the everyday lives of the villagers, shaping their relationships and the way they viewed the world. In this environment, those who dared to break the silence with laughter became symbols of courage, or targets of suspicion. Their joy challenged the accepted order, disrupting the carefully maintained balance between suffering and survival. They reminded others of what had been lost but also of what might still be possible. The village's gloom was not just the result of external hardships but also the product of this collective mindset, a shared belief that happiness was something to be feared or suppressed. It was a cycle that fed on itself, with sorrow breeding silence and silence deepening sorrow. Breaking free from this cycle required more than just individual strength. It demanded a shift in how the village saw itself and its future. But for now, the village remained wrapped in its heavy cloak of grief, where laughter was an act of rebellion and joy a scarce and precious gift. The people lived with the knowledge that to smile openly was to risk being misunderstood, and to laugh was to invite the judgment of a community bound by pain. In this place, the simple act of finding happiness was both a defiant stand and a fragile hope for something better to come. The village elders gathered beneath the sprawling branches of the ancient baobab tree, their faces stern and eyes shadowed by years of hardship. They were the keepers of tradition, the voices of wisdom in a place where every word carried weight and meaning. On this day, their attention was fixed on one bright presence who seemed out of place among the somber crowd. Nandi, the young girl whose laughter had become both a beacon of light and a source of unrest. Nandi stood quietly, her usual radiant smile subdued by the heavy atmosphere that surrounded the elders. She was not used to this kind of attention, not the kind that carried warnings and veiled threats. Her laughter, which had always flowed freely like a river in spring, was now the subject of whispered complaints and cautious glances. The elders spoke with voices that trembled slightly, not with fear of Nandi, but with a deep concern for the delicate balance they believed governed their village. The eldest among them, a man named Cato who had seen more seasons than most could count, stepped forward. His face was lined with wrinkles that told stories of drought, loss and resilience, but his eyes held a sharpness that cut through the air. "Nandi," he began, his voice low but firm, "your laughter is like thunder in the silence of our village. It shakes the very spirits that watch over us. You must understand that our peace depends on respect. Respect for those who came before us and for the forces that guide our land." Nandi listened, her heart pounding with a mixture of confusion and hurt. She had never intended to cause harm or disrespect. To her, laughter was a celebration of life itself, a way to hold on to hope when everything else seemed bleak. Yet, here she was being told that her joy was dangerous, that it disturbed something unseen but powerful. The thought weighed heavily on her young mind. Another elder, a woman named Mirembe, stepped forward. Her voice was softer but no less serious. "The spirits of our ancestors are restless," she said. "They watch over the village, guarding us from harm. When you laugh too loudly, too often, it is as if you are mocking their watchfulness. The balance is upset and with it comes misfortune. We have seen this before, times when laughter brought storms and sorrow in equal measure." The elders spoke of stories passed down through countless generations, tales of villages where joy was not tempered by caution, and how such unchecked happiness had led to disaster. They described how the spirits, angered by disrespect, had withdrawn their protection, leaving people vulnerable to drought, disease and despair. These warnings were not meant to crush Nandi's spirit, the elders insisted, but to guide her, to teach her the importance of harmony between joy and respect. Nandi's eyes welled with tears, not from anger but from a deep sadness. She understood the weight of their words, the legacy of suffering that had shaped their fears. But she also felt a flicker of resistance growing inside her. A quiet voice that whispered that laughter, even in hardship, was not something to be silenced. She wanted to explain this to the elders, to share how her laughter was a way to remember the good in the world, to keep alive the hope that things could change. But the elders were firm. They told her that if she did not learn to control her laughter, the village would suffer. "We do not ask you to abandon your joy," Cato said, "but to hold it with care. To laugh quietly in moments when it will not disturb the spirits. To remember that we live not only for ourselves but for the generations yet to come." The warning was clear. Nandi's laughter was no longer a simple expression of happiness. It was a force that could tip the fragile balance between peace and chaos. The elders urged her to see herself as a guardian of that balance, responsible for the well-being of all who lived in the village. It was a heavy burden for a young girl whose heart was full of light. As the meeting ended, Nandi stood alone beneath the baobab tree, the fading light casting long shadows across the ground. She thought about the elders' words and the fear they carried, not just fear of the spirits, but fear of change, of breaking the fragile hold that kept the village from falling into deeper despair. Her laughter, they said, was a threat, but to Nandi, it was a promise of something better. That night, as the village slept under a blanket of stars, Nandi lay awake, wrestling with the tension inside her. How could she keep her laughter safe? How could she honor the elders' warnings without losing the joy that defined her? The question lingered like a whisper in the dark, a challenge that only she could answer. The warning was a crossroads. It was a moment where tradition met the possibility of new light, a choice between silence and song, between fear and hope. Nandi knew that the path ahead would not be easy, but in her heart she held on to the belief that laughter was not just noise, but a vital breath of life. It was a truth she would carry forward, even when the village asked her to be still. The day was heavy with sorrow. The village gathered in a hushed circle around the ancient fire pit where the somber ritual was about to begin. The air was thick with grief, and even the birds had fallen silent, as if mourning alongside the people. Nandi stood near the edge of the gathering, her heart pounding not with joy, but with an anxious energy she couldn't quite quell. The elders had warned her, reminded her again and again to keep her laughter hidden, but the weight of the day pressed on her chest, making it hard to breathe. As the ritual commenced, voices chanted low and steady, calling upon the spirits to watch over the village and bring peace to restless souls. The flames flickered and danced, casting long shadows on the faces of those present, faces drawn tight with sadness and fear. Nandi tried to keep still, tried to swallow the nervous laughter that bubbled up inside her like a trapped bird desperate to escape. But then, in the midst of the solemn chanting, a sudden, unexpected moment of levity struck her. A memory of a childhood game, the way her friend had tripped clumsily just moments before, the absurdity of it all slipping through the cracks of grief. The laughter broke free, small at first, then growing into a soft, uncontrollable giggle. Her chest shook, and before she could stop it, the sound slipped out, echoing sharply against the quiet of the ritual. Heads turned sharply toward her. The chanting faltered and then stopped altogether. A cold silence fell over the gathering, heavier than before. The elders' eyes narrowed, their faces hardening with anger and disbelief. It was as if the laughter had pierced through the very fabric of the ceremony, shattering the fragile peace they had been trying to maintain. Cato, the eldest among them, rose slowly, his face grim. "Nandi," he said, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd like a whip, "you have broken the sacred silence. Your laughter has dishonored the spirits and disrupted the balance we fight to protect. Such disrespect cannot be ignored." The words were sharp, cutting through the still air and striking Nandi's heart. She looked around, seeing the disappointment and anger in the eyes of her neighbors and family. The warmth of her usual smiles vanished, replaced by a cold fear that settled deep within her bones. Without another word, the elders ordered that she be punished. The village men, stern and unyielding, moved forward and took hold of her arms. Nandi struggled weakly, her small body trembling not just from fear but from the sting of betrayal. The hands that gripped her were rough and unkind, their grip like iron chains dragging her toward a fate she had only ever feared. The beating was swift and cruel. The first blow landed across her back, sharp and unforgiving, and Nandi gasped, the air forced out of her lungs. Pain exploded through her body, searing and raw. Each strike that followed was a cruel echo of the village's sorrow, as if they were punishing not just her laughter, but the light she brought to their dark world. Tears streamed down Nandi's face, mingling with dirt and sweat. She bit her lip hard, trying to hold back the screams that threatened to tear free, but the pain was overwhelming. Her small frame shook beneath the blows, each one chipping away at her spirit, trying to silence the joy that refused to die. The crowd watched in silence, some with grim acceptance, others with conflicted eyes that reflected the tension between tradition and compassion. Nandi's mother stood at the edge of the circle, her face pale and tight with anguish, unable to intervene yet unwilling to look away. The village had spoken, and the punishment was carried out in the name of preserving peace and respect. As the beating continued, Nandi's mind drifted to the elders' warnings, the spirits, the balance, the need for control. She understood now the depth of their fear, the desperate need to protect the fragile order that held the village together. But in that moment, all she felt was the burning sting of each blow and the aching loneliness of being punished for something as natural as laughter. When it finally ended, Nandi collapsed onto the ground, her body bruised and broken, her spirit trembling but not yet extinguished. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of what had been lost and what might never be reclaimed. The elders looked down at her with solemn eyes, satisfied that the lesson had been delivered, yet unaware of the quiet rebellion growing inside the girl they sought to silence. Nandi lay there, the pain searing through her like wildfire, but beneath the surface, her heart still beat with the flicker of hope. She knew that her laughter, though punished, was not gone. It was a stubborn flame that no beating could fully snuff out, a promise that one day joy might return to the village in full bright force once more. Night settled over the village like a heavy, dark blanket, wrapping every home, every tree, and every weary soul in its quiet embrace. The stars above flickered faintly through the thin veil of clouds, their light dimmed but still persistent, a gentle reminder of the world beyond the sorrows below. In one small hut, barely illuminated by the dying embers of a fire, Nandi lay curled beneath a threadbare blanket, her body battered and bruised from the day's cruel punishment. The pain in her muscles throbbed relentlessly, sharp and raw, yet despite the agony that coursed through her, Nandi's spirit clung stubbornly to a fragile thread of light. Her eyelids fluttered softly as sleep began to pull her into its depths, and in that tender space between waking and dreaming, something extraordinary happened. A soft, almost imperceptible sound escaped her lips, a gentle laugh, fragile as a whisper but filled with the unmistakable warmth of joy. Her laughter was not the loud, carefree burst it had been in the daylight hours, but rather a quiet melody, delicate and pure. It wove its way through the dim hut, brushing past the worn walls and slipping out through the cracks in the door. Like a whispering wind, it traveled beyond the small space where Nandi rested, reaching into the sleeping village with a tender touch. Outside, the village lay still, cloaked in the hush of night. The heavy burdens of the day had finally given way to a temporary peace, and even the hardest hearts seemed softened by the calm. Yet, amid this quiet, the gentle sound of Nandi's laughter stirred something unexpected. It floated softly on the night air, a tiny spark of warmth in the cold darkness. Some villagers, nestled in their beds, awoke to the faint sound. Their eyes opened slowly, curiosity mingling with confusion. It was not a cry of pain or sorrow, but a laugh, soft, sweet, and strangely comforting. For a moment, the weight that pressed upon their chests seemed to lift just a little, as if the laughter carried with it a promise that light could return, even in the darkest times. In the hut next door, Nandi's mother stirred, feeling the faint vibration of joy slipping through the walls. She smiled through her own tears, a bittersweet recognition of the girl's enduring spirit. Despite the cruelty inflicted upon her, despite the harsh lessons of silence, Nandi's laughter remained unbroken, a delicate flame flickering defiantly in the night. The elders too felt the subtle ripple of that laughter. Some frowned, troubled by what they perceived as a disturbance in the balance they guarded so fiercely. Others, quieter and older, allowed themselves a moment of wonder, recalling the days when laughter had been a common sound in the village, a language of hope and connection rather than defiance. As the night deepened, Nandi's soft laughter continued to drift on the breeze, touching the hearts of those who dared to listen. It was a sound that carried no shame or fear, only the pure essence of a spirit refusing to be crushed. Though her body was weak and her wounds fresh, her soul sang out in quiet rebellion, a reminder that joy could survive even the harshest storms. In her dreams, Nandi laughed freely without restraint or caution. She danced among fields of wildflowers under endless skies, her laughter ringing like bells carried by the wind. She was surrounded by friends and family, their faces bright with smiles, their hearts light and unburdened. It was a world far removed from the harsh reality of the village, yet it was a world she carried within her, a place of hope and healing that no punishment could touch. When dawn approached and the first pale light began to seep into the sky, the laughter faded gently, retreating back into the quiet of the morning. but its memory lingered in the village like a soft promise, a seed planted deep within the hearts of those who had heard it. It was a reminder that beneath the weight of grief and fear, the spark of joy still lived, waiting for the moment to burst forth once more. Nandi's laughter, fragile and faint, had become a quiet revolution, a whispering wind that stirred the village's soul and hinted at the possibility of a brighter tomorrow. Though the road ahead was uncertain and the challenges many, that night showed that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit could find reasons to laugh, to hope, and to dream. In the days that followed the night when Nandi's soft laughter slipped into the village's slumber, an unusual change began to ripple through the hearts and minds of its people. The heavy cloak of grief and silence that had long shrouded the village seemed to waver, shaken by something subtle yet powerful: dreams. Strange dreams, filled with laughter and light, began to visit the villagers in the quiet hours of the night, leaving them both unsettled and strangely comforted. At first, the dreams were fleeting, a faint echo of joy that slipped away with the dawn. But as the nights passed, the visions grew more vivid and persistent. One by one, villagers found themselves immersed in scenes that contrasted sharply with their waking lives. They saw themselves laughing, running freely through sunlit fields, their faces unburdened by worry. They heard the sound of joyous laughter ringing clear and pure, a sound that felt both foreign and familiar. And always at the center of these dreams was Nandi's smiling face, bright and radiant, her eyes sparkling with a happiness that seemed to defy the sorrow that weighed down the village. For some, these dreams were a balm, a reminder of what had been lost and a whisper of what might still be possible. An elder named Mirembe, who had long carried the weight of grief in her bones, woke one morning with tears of both sadness and hope. In her dream, she had seen Nandi dancing beneath a sky painted with golden light, her laughter a song that filled the air and lifted the spirits of all who heard it. The memory stayed with Mirembe, softening the hard lines of her face and stirring a warmth she had not felt in years. Yet, not all the villagers welcomed these dreams with open hearts. For many, the visions were confusing, even frightening. The laughter that had once been forbidden now echoed relentlessly in their minds, challenging the long-held beliefs about pain, respect, and the spirits that guarded their land. Some awoke in cold sweats, shaken by the unfamiliar joy that seemed to mock the very hardships they endured. They wondered if the dreams were a sign of something deeper, a disturbance of the sacred balance the elders had so carefully maintained. Whispers spread through the village like wildfire. Some said the spirits were angry, stirred by the laughter that had escaped the silence. Others believed that Nandi's joy was a challenge to tradition, a force that threatened to unravel the fragile peace built on years of sorrow and restraint. Families debated quietly in their homes, torn between fear of change and the undeniable pull of the dream's warmth. Among the younger villagers, the dreams sparked a quiet rebellion. Children shared their visions of laughter and light with one another, their eyes bright with wonder and hope. They began to mimic the sound that had so long been silenced, whispering giggles and soft chuckles in secret, afraid but exhilarated by the feeling of joy creeping back into their lives. In the marketplaces and fields, a subtle shift could be felt, a loosening of the tight grip of despair that had held the village for generations. The elders, sensing the growing unrest, convened again beneath the baobab tree. Their faces were grave, their voices heavy with concern. Cato, the eldest among them, spoke of the dreams as omens, signs that the village stood at a crossroads between the past and an uncertain future. These visions, he said, are not simply dreams. They are messages from the spirits, calling us to remember the balance we must keep. Laughter is a powerful force, but it must be held with respect, lest it bring chaos. Yet even as he spoke, some elders quietly admitted to themselves that the dreams had stirred something long dormant within their own hearts. Memories of times when laughter was not feared but cherished flickered behind their eyes. The tension between holding on to tradition and embracing change became a silent battle waged in the quiet corners of the village's mind. For Nandi, unaware of the full extent of the dream she had inspired, the village's shifting mood was felt as a distant ripple rather than a tidal wave. But the echoes of her laughter, now carried on the breath of countless sleepers, were transforming the village in ways that no one could have predicted. The dreams brought a strange mixture of hope and fear, a reminder that joy, once suppressed, could not be easily contained. In homes and huts, people awoke with lingering smiles or furrowed brows, unsure what to make of the visions that had visited them. The dreams blurred the lines between sorrow and joy, past and future, reminding the villagers that the human heart is complex and ever-changing. They stirred conversations once thought too dangerous to speak aloud, questions about the place of laughter in a world shadowed by pain. As the days stretched into weeks, the village found itself caught in the quiet storm of these dreams. The laughter that had once been forbidden was no longer confined to a single girl's soft night whisper but had become a shared experience, a seed planted in the fertile ground of tired hearts. Whether that seed would grow into a new dawn or wither under the weight of old fears remained to be seen. But one thing was clear: the village was no longer the same. The dreams had opened a door, and through it, a new possibility had entered, a chance to imagine a future where laughter and sorrow could coexist, where the weight of grief might be lifted by the lightness of joy. And at the center of this awakening stood Nandi's smiling face, a beacon shining through the night, calling the village to remember what it meant to be alive. In the quiet hours of the evening, when the sun dipped low behind the hills and the village was bathed in the soft glow of twilight, Nandi found herself sitting alone by the edge of the river. The gentle murmur of the flowing water was a soothing balm to her aching body and restless mind. The bruises from the beating were still tender, but what weighed more heavily on her heart was the fear and misunderstanding that had grown around her laughter. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, casting faint silver patterns across the darkening sky, a few villagers approached cautiously. They had heard whispers of Nandi's words and longed to understand the light she carried. Among them was Marembi, the elder who had once spoken of laughter as a possible blessing, her eyes filled with both hope and sorrow. Nandi looked up and offered a gentle smile, one that held no bitterness despite the pain she had endured. Her voice was soft but steady as she began to speak, her words flowing like the river beside them. "I know my laughter has frightened many, and I understand why the elders have warned me. They fear what they cannot control, what seems to break the fragile balance they have fought so hard to protect. But laughter is not a weapon to harm or defy, it is a gift." She paused, gazing into the rippling water as if seeking the courage to share a truth deeper than words. Laughter is the voice of the soul when it remembers joy. It is a light that shines even in the darkest places, a bridge that connects hearts when words fail. "When I laugh, it is not because I forget the pain around me, it is because I choose to believe that pain is not the end of our story." The villagers listened intently, their faces reflecting a mix of curiosity and cautious hope. Nandi continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "For too long we have lived under a cloud of sorrow, silenced by grief and fear. But to silence laughter is to silence life itself. It is to deny the part of us that heals, that finds beauty amid hardship, and that holds on to hope even when the world seems broken." Marembi stepped closer, her eyes shining. "But how can laughter exist alongside our suffering? How do we reconcile joy with the loss we have known?" Nandi nodded thoughtfully. "They are not opposites but companions. Joy does not erase sorrow, it transforms it. When we allow ourselves to laugh, even softly, we open a space for healing. A space where wounds can begin to close and where we can remember that we are more than our pain. Laughter reminds us that we are alive, that our spirits are resilient, and that together, we can carry the burdens of our past without losing ourselves." She looked around at the faces gathered near the riverbank, young and old alike, and her eyes glistened with quiet determination. "I do not laugh to disrespect our ancestors or the spirits who watch over us. I laugh to honor the strength they passed down, the strength to endure, to survive, and to find light even in darkness. My laughter is a prayer for unity, a call for us to come together as a people who remember not only our hardships but also our capacity for joy." A hush settled over the group as Nandi's words sank deeply into their hearts. The village had long been caught between fear and hope, and in this moment, a new understanding began to take root. The elders, once wary and stern, saw in Nandi's eyes a truth that transcended tradition, a truth about the power of laughter to heal wounds unseen and to bridge the divides that pain had created. One of the younger villagers spoke softly, "Your laughter is like a seed planted in the soil of our hearts. Perhaps it is time for it to grow, to bring new life to the village." Nandi smiled, feeling the warmth of connection spread through the gathering. "Yes," she said, "it is time. Time to embrace laughter not as a threat but as a gift. To remember that joy and sorrow are threads woven into the same tapestry, each giving meaning to the other." As the night deepened, the villagers lingered by the river, sharing stories and tentative smiles. For the first time in many seasons, laughter began to ripple through the village, not loud or reckless but gentle and healing, like a soft breeze stirring the leaves. Nandi's message was clear. Laughter was not to be feared or punished but cherished as a vital part of their shared humanity. It was a light to guide them through darkness, a bond to unite them and a hope to carry them forward. And so, beneath the vast sky filled with stars, the village took its first steps toward a future where joy and grief could coexist, where laughter could echo freely once more, and where the spirit of Nandi's gift would live on in every heart. The sun rose gently over the village, casting a warm golden light that seemed to seep into every corner and crevice. For the first time in many moons, the air felt lighter, as if the very earth beneath their feet had begun to breathe anew. The long shadow of sorrow that had hung over the village was beginning to lift, and with it came a delicate but undeniable change. It started in small, almost imperceptible ways. Children's laughter, once stifled and rare, began to bubble up in secret gatherings behind the tall grasses or near the riverbank. At first, these bursts of joy were cautious, whispered giggles that seemed to apologize for their own existence. But as days passed, the laughter grew bolder, more frequent, and more infectious. It spread like wildfire, touching even the most guarded hearts. The adults, who had carried the village's grief on their shoulders for so long, found themselves drawn to these moments of lightness. In the marketplace, where once the voices were low and faces somber, there were now smiles exchanged and soft chuckles shared over small acts of kindness. A child's playful tease, a shared joke among neighbors, the sight of a flower blooming after a long drought. Even the elders, who had once warned against laughter as a danger to the village's peace, began to feel its healing power. Marembi, who had been among the first to question the old fears, watched with quiet wonder as her fellow elders' stern expressions softened. Some admitted privately that the laughter stirred memories of their own childhoods, of days when joy was not forbidden but celebrated. The village gatherings, which had long been marked by solemn chants and silent prayers, started to include moments of shared stories and laughter. Around evening fires, the community began to recount tales not only of hardship but of hope and resilience. Songs once forgotten were sung again, their melodies lifting spirits and weaving bonds between generations. This revival of joy did not erase the village's pain or erase the scars of the past. Loss and hardship still lingered like shadows at the edges of their lives. But laughter became a balm, a way to acknowledge sorrow without being consumed by it. It was a sign that the village was learning to hold both grief and happiness together, to walk forward without forgetting where they had been. Neighbors who had grown distant through years of silence found themselves reaching out with renewed warmth. Old feuds softened, replaced by gestures of forgiveness and understanding. The shared experience of embracing laughter created new connections, binding the community in a way that sorrow alone never could. Nandi, whose courage had sparked this transformation, moved through the village with a quiet joy. Though still healing from her injuries, her spirit shone brightly, a living testament to the power of laughter to challenge fear and inspire change. Children ran to greet her with smiles, and even the elders looked on with respect and newfound hope. One afternoon, as the village gathered beneath the baobab tree, Cato spoke openly about the journey they had taken. His voice, once heavy with caution, now carried a tone of acceptance and pride. "We have learned that laughter is not the enemy but the healer," he said. "It is a gift that binds us, that reminds us we are alive and together. In embracing joy, we honor both our past and our future." The village's transformation was not without challenges. There were moments when old fears surfaced, when the weight of tradition pulled some back into silence. But each time laughter rose again, it was met with growing acceptance and strength. The people learned that joy was not a fleeting escape but a steady flame that could illuminate even the darkest paths. With laughter returning, the village found itself more connected, not only to one another but to the land that sustained them. Fields once barren began to show signs of life, as if the earth itself responded to the change in spirit. The air carried the scent of blooming flowers and fresh rain, a reminder that renewal was possible even after the longest drought. As seasons turned, the village grew stronger, its people bound by the shared understanding that life's hardships need not silence the soul's song. Laughter became the language of healing, a bridge across pain, a promise that joy and sorrow could coexist in balance. In this newfound harmony, old wounds began to close. Hearts opened wider, and the community embraced the complexity of their journey, a journey marked not by denial of suffering but by the courage to laugh despite it. The village had found a way to honor both the tears they shed and the smiles they shared. And so, beneath the endless sky, the village moved forward, its spirit renewed, its bonds deepened, and its laughter echoing like a gentle river flowing through the heart of the land. The legacy of that change lived on in every smile, every shared story, and every quiet moment of joy that wove the people together into a tapestry stronger than sorrow alone could ever create. Nandi's laughter had become the heartbeat of the village, a gentle rhythm that pulsed through every home, every heart, and every story told beneath the vast African sky. It was no longer just the laughter of a single girl but a legacy woven into the very fabric of the community, a living symbol of resilience, hope, and unity that had transformed a place once shrouded in sorrow into a village alive with light. Years had passed since that first soft laugh slipped into the night air, carrying with it a promise of change. The village had endured storms both of nature and spirit, yet Nandi's laughter had endured too, growing stronger with every season. It was heard in the playful shouts of children chasing one another through fields of tall grass, in the warm greetings exchanged between neighbors, and in the shared songs that rose from the earth during gatherings beneath the baobab tree. The elders who once feared that laughter would bring ruin had come to see it as a gift from the ancestors themselves, a reminder that joy was a force of healing and connection. They had passed down the story of Nandi's courage and the power of her laughter to every child, teaching that it was not just sound but a sacred bond that held the village together through hardship. In the cool evenings as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with hues of amber and violet, families gathered to share tales of old and new. Parents told their children of the girl who laughed in the face of fear, who had dared to break the silence and remind them all that life was meant to be lived with joy as well as sorrow. The story was told not as a simple tale of defiance but as a lesson in the strength found in embracing the full spectrum of human emotion. Nandi herself had grown into a woman whose spirit was as radiant as the dawn. Though time had softened the sharp edges of her youthful pain, the memory of the beating and the warnings from the elders remained etched in her heart, a reminder of the courage it took to be different, to bring light where darkness had reigned for so long. Yet she carried no bitterness. Instead, she was a living testament to the idea that laughter was not a rebellion but a healing balm, a sacred song that united the village in ways words could not. The village had changed in other ways too. Where once there was suspicion and silence, there was now openness and conversation. People learned to hold their grief gently, alongside their laughter, recognizing that both were necessary to the human soul. The fields flourished, crops grew tall and strong, and the river that had once run low now sang a steady, lively tune, echoing the vitality of the people it nourished. At festivals and ceremonies, laughter was no longer hushed or hidden. It was invited, celebrated, and woven into the music and dance that marked the seasons. The villagers had crafted new rituals, blending the old reverence for the spirits with joyous expression. Children learned songs that taught the importance of balance, between joy and sorrow, silence and sound, tradition and change. Nandi often stood at the center of these celebrations, her laughter ringing clear and free, a beacon that drew others into the circle of light. She became a storyteller, a keeper of history and hope, reminding the village that their resilience was rooted not just in survival but in their ability to find happiness amid hardship. Her laughter was a bridge between generations, a thread that connected the past's lessons with the future's promise. As time passed, the village's reputation grew beyond its borders. Travelers came to witness the place where laughter had reclaimed its rightful place, where a community had healed through the simple, profound act of joy. They marveled at the transformation, a village once marked by silence and sorrow now vibrant with song and celebration. The story of Nandi's laughter spread, inspiring neighboring villages and distant lands. It became a symbol of hope in times of despair, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit could find reasons to smile, to connect, and to heal. Elders from other communities sought counsel with Nandi and the village leaders, eager to learn how laughter had rekindled the flame of life. In quiet moments, Nandi would reflect on the journey, the pain she had endured, the fear she had faced, and the courage it had taken to keep laughing. She understood that her laughter was never just about her. It was a gift to her people, a healing song passed down by ancestors who whispered through the winds and the rustling leaves. It was a legacy meant to be shared, nurtured, and carried forward by all who believed in the power of joy. Nandi's laughter had become more than sound, it was the village's soul made audible, a timeless melody that told of endurance, love, and the unbreakable bonds that held them together. It was a call to live fully, to embrace both pain and pleasure, and to find strength in the unity of shared human experience. The village children learned early that laughter was sacred. They were taught to honor it, to use it wisely, and to remember the story of the girl who dared to laugh when the world told her to be silent. This lesson became part of their education, woven into the songs they sang and the games they played. Parents watched with pride as their children's laughter echoed through the hills and valleys, a sign that the village's heart beat strong and true. They knew that the journey was ongoing, that challenges would come and go, but they held fast to the belief that laughter would always light their way. As the years turned to decades and generations passed beneath the endless sky, Nandi's laughter remained a living thread that connected past, present, and future. It was a testament to the village's resilience, a gift born from pain but blossoming in joy. The legacy of laughter was not merely about sound or celebration. It was a profound understanding that life, with all its trials, was meant to be met with an open heart. It was about the courage to be vulnerable, the strength to forgive, and the wisdom to find light even when shadows fell long. And so, beneath the vast African sky, where the baobab tree stood tall and proud, the village thrived, not just in body but in spirit. The people carried with them the laughter of a girl who refused to be silenced, whose joy became a beacon of hope and unity for all who called that land home. Nandi's laughter was a promise whispered on the wind, a promise that no matter how heavy the night, the dawn would come with song, with joy, and with the unyielding strength of a community bound together by the simple, sacred gift of laughter.